Hi, I'm Linda Murken. I'm a Story County Supervisor and I'm running for re-election this year. I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a Story County native. I lived on a farm just west of Gilbert with my parents when I was growing up. I'm a graduate of Gilbert High School and Iowa State University. After graduating from Iowa State, I got a job in community corrections. I started as a probation and parole officer with adult offenders. And a few years later, I became the director of the Department of Correctional Services for the 2nd Judicial District of Iowa, which is 22 counties in north central Iowa, Story County being the largest county. In that job, I managed an agency with a $16 million budget and 160 employees. We supervised over 3,200 offenders throughout 22 counties in north central Iowa. I retired from that job not because I didn't like it and didn't see more challenges, but I wondered what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And I thought, I really like this job, but I know I'll really like some other challenges as well. So I retired early and said, let's see what life brings. I was the first president of the Gilbert and Franklin Township Fire Agency and helped reorganize that after that agency split from the West Story Fire Agency. Then I got involved with the League of Women Voters of Story County and the League of Women Voters of Iowa and worked for them for a couple years. In 2016, Paul Toot, who was then a county supervisor and was on the ballot for re-election, unexpectedly passed away and there was a vacancy. And I was appointed by the party to run for that vacancy. I barely lost that election, but I learned a lot. And I was asked then if I would run again in 2018, and I said yes, I would. So I started in 2017 on a campaign. I campaigned for 2 years, and I set about to learn as much as I could about Story County government. I attended Board of Supervisors meetings, I talked with department heads, and I was elected in 2018. And at that time I thought, boy, I spent 2 years looking at county government. I should know what I'm doing when I get there. Well, I got there and I found out I had just scratched the surface. County government is incredibly complicated. The budget has lots of sources of funds. Some of those are restricted. Some of those you can use on anything. They have different time limits sometimes. You'll find things that the county does that you just didn't have a clue. So that gets to why I'm running for re-election. I've learned a lot in the last 4 years. A lot about Story County government and a lot about Story County and its communities. I thought about running again, and I said, if I don't run, and have the opportunity to serve for another 4 years, I will just be wasting a lot of that knowledge and information that I have gained in the last 4. So I am running for re-election, and I would appreciate your vote. Thank you, and have a good day. I really appreciate this question because this is a lot of what the Story County Supervisors do. I've kind of divided it in my mind into 3 areas, and they're all complementary. But I'm going to talk first about smaller communities, the ones that are under 3,000. And we've got about 10 towns that are under 3,000. The things that I see really important for them to continue to develop and thrive in the next 10 years are housing, transportation, employment and daycare, which I put together, the downtowns, keeping them vital, and broadband. And we're going to talk, I know, later with some questions about, we have some questions about those later, so I'm not going to tell you right now about some of the things the county's been doing, because we'll cover them later in the interview. So then I'll move on to the unincorporated areas, the rural areas. And that's something I think we don't give enough attention to, and we need to, because agriculture is such an important industry in Story County and Iowa. The rural issues that I see are that we need more wetlands for water quality. We need to talk with landowners about farming practices. We need to encourage edge-of-field practices, cover crops, using less inputs on the soil, which you can do with cover crops, and adding small grains into crop rotations where that's possible. Also, we have several ecologically sensitive areas in Story County, and Story County Conservation has done a good job of protecting those. We need to look at more of those areas that are sensitive areas, particularly wetlands, prairies, remnant prairies, those kind of things, and try to get those into Conservation's bailiwick, because they can do the best job of preserving those areas and also making them available for the public to enjoy. And going along with that are more recreational opportunities that are accessible to everybody. Some of the things that we've done at the county, in terms of those things, the unincorporated areas, we have put some more money towards paving the Heart of Iowa Nature Trail. Hopefully we are close to getting that one done. We've done campground improvements at Hickory and at Dakins Lake. The TELC, I think a lot of people in Ames know about the Tedesco Environmental Learning Corridor. We have a new bike trail there to join that onto R38. At the county, we hired a watershed coordinator last year, and the reason we did that is because we know that landowners need help with edge-of-field practices. If you're a farmer, you may have heard about bioreactors or saturated buffers or something like that, but you really don't, or WASCOBs or whatever the thing is, but you don't really know what they are and what's right for your land. Our watershed coordinator goes out, talks to landowners, in particular farmers, and takes an engineer with and said, okay, here are the issues you have with your land, and here's what would be the best way to use edge-of-field practices. And most importantly, she helps get them funding. There's funding at the federal level, there's funding at the state level. The county and the city of Ames have put a little bit of money into it also, and she can put together a package usually that will do 100% of the installation costs. And that's really important because farmers look at the bottom line. And if you say, this is a good thing I can do to protect water quality, it's good for my land, and it's going to be, and there's money to pay for it, we can talk them into doing them. The other thing that I did is I organized the Watershed Management Authority for the headwaters of the South Skunk River. And we've been working about a year on an assessment to see what we can do to improve water quality by southern Hamilton and western Story County. I would love to, in the next few years, also look at the Indian Creek watershed and see if we could get a WMACO in there. Now I'll go to urban development. There's 3 cities, Huxley, Story City, and Nevada. They're in the range of 3,000 to 7,000 population, and then of course we have Ames at 67,000. And in terms of the county, looking at the county as a whole and those cities, I see that they really serve as hubs for services that smaller communities simply can't, don't have the bandwidth, don't have the population or the money to do. So I think what we do there is we support opportunities for services that can be located in these communities and can kind of serve smaller communities around there. We can increase some collaborative efforts among those communities. Maybe one small community, 2 small communities that are next to each other can't both afford to do the same thing. Maybe one can do an A, one can do B, and that way you get them closer out into the regional areas. Also, we need to help keep businesses healthy out there and help fill in the gaps that we see. Just some examples, and these are just a few, some examples that we have done that have, I would call urban development. The new construction of the Nevada Field House, and that's going to be available countywide. The supervisors put a considerable amount of money towards that. We were very glad to do that. Also the Fitch Indoor Aquatic Center in Ames, which is going to be new construction, and I want to commend the city of Ames for sticking with that and working on that. I know they've had a lot of, had a lot of challenges, but they're showing tenacity there, and I'm really glad for that. We also have given some money for the Bertha Bartlett Library expansion in Story City, and the libraries serve the unincorporated areas, and that one serves a good-sized unincorporated area. And lastly, the Ames History Museum is going to be doing an expansion and renovation, and we have invested some money in that as well. There's several negative impacts. One is rental prices are very high, and we know that Iowa State population drives that because there's a real need for rental properties in Ames and a lot of competition. Also, the increasing costs of expanding infrastructure, particularly with supply chain problems and shortages. The price of land continues to go up, and those things are driving housing costs up. Also, that we've seen a lack of availability of starter homes. And I think that's something that college students who are looking to go out and get first jobs are looking at, how do I get into housing? That's a really difficult thing. We also see, we have an increasing number of seniors who are going to be downsizing, and I think we're going to need more senior housing, independent senior housing in Story County. And then we have all the people who are unhoused, who are couch surfing, who are living in their cars, who are in shelters, or may just be living outside. Those are the negative impacts. The solutions, some of those are in our housing study that the Story County Supervisors just commissioned. And it looks out the next 20 years and talks about what kind of housing is needed throughout Story County. It takes a good look at all the small towns. And has a lot of recommendations in it. Our staff have compiled an action plan out of that, but we need some help in implementing that. So we currently have a request for proposals out for an entity to help us manage that and move that forward. It's good to have data when embarking on planning. So I'm glad we did that study. I mean, it meant we couldn't do some things right away, but we thought we needed data to make sure we're making the wisest use of any taxpayer monies that we might and eventually put to housing uses. And we do actually put money into housing right now. We financially support the Story County Housing Trust Fund. They do a lot in terms of giving grants and loans for rehabbing housing. And as somebody said to me the other day, the best affordable housing is the housing that's already there. So we need to not, if there are structures that we can save, they can be good starter homes or good use for anybody who is happy with an older home, and in fact values an older home, that's a good thing to do. We also took some rescue plan funds and granted those to the Housing Trust Fund to look at trying to get one of the homes for Iowa in one of our smaller communities. So there's three things when I think of housing that I think of. I think of infill. We have infill opportunities. In our smaller communities, though, a developer won't go out for just one lot. You know, they need about 5 lots. So we've got to keep looking for infill opportunities and how we can help make those a reality in our smaller communities. Density is also an issue. And I live on a farm. I grew up on a farm, so I'm really concerned about maintaining our prime agricultural land. I think density has a couple of values. It limits the loss of ag land. It also lowers infrastructure costs. And the other thing is rehab, as we talked about. The best houses are the ones that we can keep. I'm glad you asked that question because I've been working on that quite a bit lately, as you know, Greg. We've all heard various statistics on the availability of broadband in Story County. I've been looking at those. Some of them are a few years old. They're based on census survey data. Others are based on software registrations, so one from Microsoft. And there's others where the service providers say they are providing. The long and the short of it right now is we don't know the exact number in terms of the people who are served, underserved, or unserved in Story County. There's something going on right now that's going to help us get a better handle on that, though. The FCC and the state OCIO, which is the Office of the Chief Information Officer, are currently updating their maps. They've gotten information from service providers, and that's what the service providers say, this is where we provide broadband, and here are our speeds. Now, they also had what they call the challenge period open to say if consumers had, said, no, that's not, because it goes down to address. It's an interesting map. It's on the state OCIO website, but it goes down by the address. And you can look at it and say, are you served? Do they say you're served, underserved, or we're not serving this area? So once the OCIO gets all that challenge data, as they called it, put together, they will have a new map. So why is that new map important? Because there's new funding opportunities coming up. We have funding, there's possible funding through the USDA with the Reconnect 5 program, which, and there's also some possibilities through the new infrastructure. It's the Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment, I believe is the name of the program in U.S. Department of Commerce. It's BEAD is the acronym. Anyway, I think I've got that right. But so what all this means is that we are needing to work right now to get ready for those opportunities. The county is working with the chamber to see how we can get some grant applications written for this. We're getting data together now, and we're getting ready to go after the next round of funding. But let me tell you what we've already done. With the American Rescue Plan funds, or the ARPA funds, well, first, let me back up here. Let me thank Dan Culhane with the chamber, because a couple years ago, I was kind of kind of the supervisor who is going to look at rural broadband. The reason is I'm on rural broadband. I have fixed satellite, and I looked at the last week I've looked at my speed, and it's 2817. 28 upload, 17 download. No, download, upload, excuse me. I always confuse those. But what it means is I'm underserved, okay? Because you have to have over 100 download and 20 megabytes per second upload to be considered fully served. So I'm in the underserved category, just barely. But you know, for me that's okay. I don't need a lot of broadband. But for families that have kids, and particularly during the pandemic, with kids at home, with parents home working, kids going to school, everything online, we heard from so many people, this just isn't cutting it. So what we did with our rescue plan funds is we talked to the telcos, and they are the fiber providers out in the rural areas. And there was a couple rounds of money through the OCIO. The county supervisors supported those with letters of support. We also did a small grant match with ARPA funds. And our service providers, the telephone companies who do the fiber, brought in $14.9 million. Now, some of that will go to other areas adjacent to Story County, but my rough estimate is at least half of that will be invested in Story County. So getting back to that statistic, whatever the statistic is now, it's going to be significantly better in the next couple of years. And let me tell you why I say couple years. Our current technology is really based on infrastructure, laying fiber in the ground or towers. That takes time. We can't just hand over a check to somebody and they'll turn a switch in their office and you have broadband tomorrow. It doesn't always work that way. In fact, often in the rural areas, it does not work that way. We have two problems to overcome, and one is the cost of fiber in the more remote areas. Heard somebody on a Commerce webinar on the BEAD program the other day saying, laying 1 mile of broadband fiber costs the same in Manhattan as in rural Missouri. He could have said rural Iowa. But what does that mean? That means if a company is looking at laying fiber in Manhattan, how many customers do they have in a mile? You go out to rural Iowa, rural Story County, you may have 1 customer per mile. Even if the government were to pay for that fiber, can a company that's a for-profit company make that commitment and say, we're going to keep that 1 customer? How much are they going to make from that 1 customer? We really have to look at some other technologies, and their satellite technologies, wireless technologies are getting better all the time. So it's going to take time to install this infrastructure with these OCIO funds. It's probably going to, but in the next couple of years, as I said, whatever our statistic is now, it's going to be better. So, as I said, we've been working with the Chamber on this. We hope to have some grant applications in to the state or to the feds. I think the feds will be earlier. The state has to do some planning. The monies they're getting with the BEAD program, the state of Iowa is required to come up with a plan that serves every Iowan. So that's going to take some time. I hope they don't spend all the money on planning because we have some needs out here. And one last thing about broadband. The county is not a utility provider. This is going to be a collaboration with the service providers that we have and the service providers that we can find who will say, hey, I can help with that problem. And I am very confident that with Iowa State, we have some great resources there, with our service providers, with the state, and with the Chamber, and some other partners that will be able to meet these goals. Well, first, we have already provided funding through Asset for childcare in Story County. But then when we put out our request for proposals for our ARPA money last year, we received several proposals. And one that was really interesting was for Slater, a business person who wanted to develop a child care center where there was none in town. And Slater has been, by studies, shown as a child care desert. So we were really interested in that. We worked with her. We tried to do that under ARPA funding. There were just too many roadblocks for her to meet with all the federal ARPA requirements, and they are many. So last week we said we're going to fund that, but we moved it to general fund. We're really excited about that We're glad to be able to do that. We had to do some research to say, is it allowable for us to grant money to a privately funded business? And it is. She also did something which we required, which I really appreciated, because we did realize that we did not want to just be put, eventually the tax money going to a profit for a private company. We said, can you do a pay it forward program? In other words, people who would like to have their children in your daycare but cannot find any other source of funding and don't have it, can you set aside the same amount of money the supervisors granted to you as a pay it forward program to really to cover their costs? And she was very glad to work with us on that. She had a lot of questions about that, and she's done a very good job of that. But we've also heard from a couple other communities. I think Colo and Roland are also interested in child care. I know, Greg, that you're working with Colo and have worked with Roland, and I don't know exactly how the supervisors can help there, but we're looking forward to helping, and we'd like to see what we can do, because it is essential for workforce. The other thing I would point out here is we do fund the workforce retraining program that Chamber runs for us and do a great job of, and that gives financial assistance to people so they can go back and earn certificates or degrees. Mostly it's certificates so they can get in the workforce quickly. That can also be used for childcare if that's something that they need. Good question. And I'm going to start out with a quote from a gentleman from Ogden who was at the Economic Development Housing Summit last week. He said, "Nothing happens by accident and nothing happens in a vacuum." And that's just a good reminder of the collaboration you need. It's not only that you need other people's support and other agencies, other communities' support, that's where you get the ideas. And I think they did a great job in Ogden of working together and brainstorming and getting ideas, trying things out. As he said, it's not always pretty. Not everything always works the first time, but that's why we get second chances on stuff. So that's the first thing, I think, collaboration. The cities, the chamber, businesses, Iowa State University, they have community and regional planning department, which I think could help us. We've probably not tapped very much. I've talked with them some, and the research park. So we have a lot of people, a lot of agencies, that we can collaborate with to get those good ideas going and to figure out how we're going to make it happen. The best way I think the supervisors can financially contribute to economic development is to provide funds for grant matches. And we've done that a lot for smaller communities. If they're wanting to do improvements like the Opera House in Cambridge, like the old buildings in Zering that they've done an excellent job of, if we can do grant matches there and leverage state monies and federal monies, I think that is the very best use of our limited monies at the county. The other thing that I know we will keep doing because it's been such a success is the position here in the chamber that does the economic development outreach to our smaller communities. I've seen people in that position help smaller communities strategize, help them problem solve, help them get money, informing them of grant opportunities, helping them as they're writing grants. And the position's a great resource for the supervisors to help us connect with the smaller communities. We learn information that we might have otherwise missed that helps us figure out how we can help the communities. Greg, you gave, just the other day, you gave a report at the supervisors meeting that was just amazing. I just kept writing notes, and I had a piece of paper and I just kept writing notes and running smaller because it was like all of these things are going on. It was great to see. We have a very, very vibrant county. We have a lot going on in a lot of communities, and we need to keep a good thing going. So, 3 action items. First, the action plan on housing, get that moving. Second is the League of Women Voters gave us a study on rural transportation, and it's excellent, but what they said is it's basically just a beginning. We need to get some planning going on that, and I agree. I really want to thank the League for their leadership on this. And yeah, we need to move forward on rural transportation. We need to delve deeper. I'd really like to see some models from some other counties of what they're doing in rural transportation. It's something I haven't looked at a lot yet, and I want to. Third is developing relationships with the agricultural community, because that's how we protect our water quality and how we protect our farmland. All our nutrient reduction strategy in Iowa is voluntary. All of the efforts in the ag community are voluntary. So we need to reach out to landlords and we need to let them know we're not trying to regulate, or landlords and farmers. And I say landlords because a lot of the farms are owned by women now, and some of the landlords, whether they're female or male, do not live on the farm. So they're landlords who have renters. We've got to talk with the renters as well as the farm owners, and we need to protect our water quality and our farmland for the future. Fourth, I know it was three. Fourth is broadband, of course, and I've talked about that enough, so I'll stop there.